Welcome everyone to the recap of round number 1 of my match against Grandmaster David Navara, the Czech number 1. The first game was already very tough. We played a bit more than 5 hours, but without spoiling anything, for those of you who have not seen the game yet and how it concluded, let's jump in. I started the match with the white pieces and started the match with knight f3 on the first move. What a big surprise. David played d5, which was sort of what I expected. Of course, he can play almost anything, but this is what I did look at quite closely before the match. And I went for d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, the very classical Queen's Gambit, and he went for the Rogozin defense, which also is not a big surprise. David has many games with the Rogozin, and it generally also suits him quite well. He's a very dynamic player. But also plays quite correct openings, and therefore it suits him quite well, and he plays it quite often. Now, of course, I had something in mind. I played the very classical variation with taking on d5 and bishop g5, which, if you are a true follower, you might remember that I also played that against Yu Yang in the World Cup, the final game of the match, which I lost. He started here with a move bishop f5. I'm speaking about Yu Yang, but David chose the normal move order with short castle e3 and bishop f5. I should have also mentioned that I'm not looking at the engine at all for this analysis. I still don't know like what happened in the game, what was the evaluation, and I will probably not know until the match is finished. And I'll just tell you what are my thoughts on the game. David chose this move order. Yu Yang against me started with bishop f5, which does have the drawback that white has queen e4 check. And after knight c6, e3, which is also quite a playable line for black. The theory goes something like this: knight e7, and here, not knight e7, g5 somewhere along the lines should be included, and I think this is the line how it usually goes. And there is also some theory here. I definitely looked at some position like this. Against Yu Yang, I actually didn't play queen a4. I played the move e3, and after knight d7, the move a3. Similar to what we will see in the game. This was something I came up with, I think it was definitely before the World Cup, because I was trying to play that line there as well, even though I did not manage to get it. The computers will tell you that this is absolutely nothing, but at least it's kind of a surprise. There are, I think, around 8 games here. Black has to take here on c3. They cannot go back, because then they have some concrete issues with queen b3. Cannot keep everything protected. So black needs to take, and already here, black has many different good moves here. Knight bd7 is definitely the most logical, and also one of the good ones. Actually, queen d6 was kind of one small issue which I faced also with this line, because now usually what black is trying to get is knight e4. And okay, without going into too much detail, I was having a bit some issues with this one, because here I don't get my typical play, which I at least succeeded in getting in the game. So all of this is completely equal, that much I know. Short castle, and here is, I guess, the first critical position. David went for the move queen a5, which is one of the moves I've analyzed. In general, what I'm hoping for in this position is to go rook b1, knight d2, and then a4, a5 for some pressure on the b file. And my dark squared bishop can sometimes be quite good. On some occasions, it can also be quite bad, as it was the case in the game. I think I reacted in the way which I was intending to do, rook fb1. Other moves include rook c8. There was one game which kind of inspired me. It was Anton Korobov against Laurent Fressinier, where rook c8 was played. And also here, usually what is generally the idea of the line here is to go for a setup like this, and then try to push a4, a5. I think what David did was quite smart. Rook fb1, now b6. And after knight d2, he went for the move queen a4, which stops white from getting in a4 followed by queen b5. Luckily, I still had a look at this in the morning today, because otherwise white's play at least is fairly simple. And I think it's quite important for black, if he doesn't go for queen a4, to take this rook, because after a4, how black is supposed to play is, I think, like this with rook c3. And after queen b5, now we see the idea that the rook is on a8 and the pawn on a7 is protected. And here, a very important thing is that after knight e8, well, first of all, rook c2 I think was the best move. And now I should go rook d1, not to allow knight e4. Because if the knight reaches the e4 square, it can be a little bit strange too. The knight is just very good on e4. And if knight e8 comes, then I want to react with bishop g3. Stopping knight d6 or knight c7, obviously the pawn on b5 can be fairly weak. But if the knight is not getting there, I mean, the position is still completely equal. Both sides have some potential, but I would say that white probably has a bit more. If we imagine the king coming to d3, white has the better pawn structure, and something can happen. But I'm sure that this position I even still had, and it was still completely equal according to the machine. But I guess if black takes this rook, then he could already be in some danger. Also, pushing c4 is usually not what black wants, especially now because the queen on a5 is just terribly misplaced. And I have some ideas to play with f3 followed by e4 quickly. So David played queen a4, which stops me from getting in a4 myself. I played the move f3, and here I was basically on my own. The only thing about the position which I understood was that my plan should be knight f1, and then either bishop f2 or bishop e1 followed by knight g3. This is what the machine was telling me, and it seemed like a reasonable plan. The knight could maybe come to f5, but as it usually is when you are then sitting on the board, it's not as easy as you think it would be while analyzing everything back home. There was one quite funny line which I looked at. This one I still remembered, it was c4. As I said, it's not a really strategically desirable move for black if he doesn't get the queen side rolling immediately. But there is a concrete idea, which is g6 followed by queen c2. And I remember I looked at this one. Now, obviously, there's a double attack, but thankfully I have a nice tactic here, which is the move bishop e1. Discovered attack, now I'm ready to take h6. I think the position is still equal here, but at least it looks a little bit scary for black. If the pawn on h6 is falling, the dark square is a little bit weak. So this was the whole tactical justification of this idea. He went rook e8, which I thought could be kind of a definitely not a wasted move, but I thought he should maybe, at least from what I understand about the position, was that he should try to play on the c file. And he doesn't really need the rook on e8 necessarily. Like here, if knight f1, he could, for example, let's say a move like rook c2 and then try to double immediately with, and he doesn't need the rook on e8. If rook b4, there is still queen c6, so I'm not winning material here. I guess I would have, I'm not even sure how I would have continued here. Maybe a move like bishop e1, and at some point maybe queen b3, because the queen on a4 is a bit annoying. Position is definitely also still equal. It was like, I'm not sure, like speaking freely now, if it was the greatest idea. I did play some training games here against some Austrian friends, and typically it was not so easy for black to react practically. But David just reacted really well, and quickly I got into a pretty unpleasant position, and he just completely outplayed me. So knight f1, rook ac8. Here I spent some time and I went for bishop f2. Mostly I was considering if I should go bishop e1 or bishop f2 here. The upside of bishop f2 is that, first of all, it looks a bit more natural because e3 is protected. But the upside of bishop e1 could be that the c3 square is protected, and maybe the bishop could come to d2 later on. But usually I went to f2 in my analysis, so I decided for that as well. David played very naturally, knight f8. And this g4 move, it's probably a little bit too much in the position. I was quite optimistic here because I thought that now, especially, I never really, while analyzing this knight f8 plan, for some reason didn't really came across. And maybe I was trying to immediately not punish it, but it just looked fairly reasonable to play g4 and then just h4 g5, and yeah, I also played it fairly quickly. I spent less than 10 minutes on the move. Maybe I can think about a move like queen b5 at some point. This is usually what I should achieve, but in the game I was not sure what happens if he goes for the move queen c2, and then the pawn on c3 is attacked. But I'm not so sure if g4 is really what I should be doing in a position. Later on, I really regretted all of this gaining space on the king side, because my king was just really weak and I just created weaknesses. So I think this is a critical position. If the move knight g3, then I was actually not sure what is the best for him. I even considered that he could go for g6 here. Just stopping knight f5, and now my knight is also not doing that well. Of course, he's weakening the dark squares here, but I didn't see a concrete way to punish that. If I go for e4 here, it just looked like my center is too weak. I didn't even calculate that much here, but for example, what could come is maybe some move like queen c2. And it looks like my pawn on e4 especially is under some pressure. But maybe queen b5, now that I look at it, it looks like a reasonable move. Only question is what to do after queen c2. Maybe just rook c1, where does the queen actually go? It's probably quite misplaced here on the king side now that I think about it. I could just go rook c1, and if queen f5 or here, he doesn't really have any attacking chances on the king side, so I can probably just go a4 here, and then a5. When I look at it now, it looks quite pleasant. So maybe he should take, but then I think I would be more or less happy here with a4, a5 coming. Still, it should definitely not be the end of the world here. Like even if black stays with a move like knight b7, b6 is always firmly protected. So it definitely should never be much for me. Okay, I went for the move g4, knight e6, h4. He took and went rook c4. And now queen f5 was probably also a little bit too ambitious. I was banking very much on the advance with g5, but just kind of, I don't even know what I was thinking. I was mostly thinking about queen d7. I thought that he might do that with actually quite a nice trick, because if g5, then I think he can do this. Knight takes d4, queen d7, and knight e2 check, king g2, and then knight takes d7, and black has won a pawn on the way. So even here, I'm not sure what I was planning. Probably also rook a2, because if black now makes no move whatsoever, then I can actually go for g5, and then the e2 square is protected. So this whole knight takes d4 tactic just doesn't work there anymore. But I'm not sure that I should go for this queen f5. Maybe a more reasonable move is to go queen b3 immediately, which I then later did in the game. But this would definitely be a better version. If he goes queen c6 now, then I can probably just start pushing a4 immediately. I'm still not sure that this whole g4, h4 is really what I want in the position, but I don't currently see a way how black can make use of that immediately. And I do have some play if a5 is coming. So I think that this is where things started to go a little bit wrong for me. Knight g3 and knight e8, I think that was a really strong move. With knight g3, I still thought, also especially with rook a2, that maybe I still have some g5 coming, but after knight e8, I realized that all of my pieces have to go back. He gets knight d6 in, and I'm probably significantly worse here. But I think I made the best of the position, which I possibly can, meaning I think I defended quite well. After g6, I went queen d3, which is also a little bit of a sad move to make. My problem was that if queen f6, then I spotted that he has the move knight takes d4. And then black has won a pawn. And I didn't really like queen e5 just because he could maybe go rook e8, and then knight takes d4 is also threatening. Maybe I can go back somewhere here, but I didn't really think about this during the game. So I decided to go for queen d3. Queen a4 was kind of a pleasant surprise for me. I was expecting him to go for b5 here, which was quite a big problem, honestly. I didn't really see what I can do now, because now I'm not getting a4. My idea was probably just to stay here. Like I would have gone maybe rook b2, a6, and then something like bishop u1. Or thing is, I cannot even go king g2 because he has this tactic always. And if I take, then there's knight f4 check. And I lose the queen. So I probably just need to stay like this, protect the c3 square, and just hope for the best. It's also not like 100% clear how black is going to break through, but it looked really unpleasant. I'm not saying that queen a4 was a bad move. It also seemed reasonable, but I was kind of happy to get the move a4 in, with ideas to open some files for my rooks. Knight g7. h5 and now a5 and h5. Strategically, I wouldn't say lost, but definitely much worse. Just because my bishop is really bad and his knight is quite good. If my bishop would be on e5 and they can launch some concrete threats, then the roles would be reversed. But he's just the one who strikes first, basically, with h5. I think I still made the best of the position. I didn't see anything better. I took on b6. I don't think that he can take on g4 here, even though I considered it briefly. I think I can just go b7 and after rook b8. Actually, what was I thinking here? I just thought that I probably have some defensive resources, but don't even really see it now. Maybe king h2, something like that. At least he was low on time, and I thought that, okay, I'm probably not losing immediately there. I have some ideas. And as expected, he recaptured immediately. Now I went queen d1. I think this was a good move, which maybe he missed. Because all other moves are quite bad for me. If I take on b6, then he can just take on g4, and I think I'm just going to get checkmated here. I mean, there's no way I can survive this. And if I go h5, then if I go g5, then he has queen h3 at the very least, which looks terrible for me. And I don't really have anything else. If I take on h5, then his knight is just joining the game. Maybe he even has something better here. Maybe queen h3 is another possibility, threatening rook c1. Might even be a bit stronger. But I played queen d1, which still keeps everything protected for the time being. He took on g4, which I was actually quite happy to see, because now my queen on f3 gets a square. But it's probably not easy for him to find a better move, because I'm not threatening to take on b6 immediately, but I'm intending to go rook b2 next, and then I can take on b6. So he took knight d8, which is a good maneuver, intending knight d6 or knight f6 followed by knight e4. Queen f3, I think the only logical move, stopping knight f6 and also knight d6, because if he goes knight d6, then I can take the pawn. He went rook 4c6 and now g5, which is a very ugly move to make, because I'm weakening even more light squares. But I really wanted to stop knight f6. What I also thought about was the move rook b2, but then let's just say knight f6. I thought about both rook b6 or g5, but just to make a point here, I think if the knight comes to e4, then I cannot survive. Like, for example, this should just be losing, and rook c2, I'm just losing on the spot. I did think about rook b6 here, but it also didn't seem like I can survive this. At least practically, this looked really, really bad for me. Maybe I can kind of hang on here with rook b2, but I didn't see the concrete problem with g5 and thought it was probably the best shot for me. He went knight g7. If he goes, how can he try to make knight d6 work? If he goes queen e6, I'm not even sure I consider that move in the game. But I could maybe play rook b5. I could also go for this. Then the question is if knight d6 comes. Yeah, now, still if the knight reaches e4, I'm not sure I'm so optimistic about my chances. But okay, here at least I can probably keep the second rank protected, and maybe I can live to see another day here. He went knight g7, going for some nice squares, f5 or e6. I went rook a b2, hitting the pawn on b6, and he went queen e6. This was kind of the time trouble phase. He was on increment. I still had a little bit of time, which I think helped me to survive this stage of the game. Rook b5, hitting the pawn on d5. Around here, I was already feeling better about my position. I'm not so sure what he could have done better here. It was quite hard to evaluate, especially with low time. So king g2, knight f5, rook b2, and now king g7. And then I was happy to play the move queen f4. Here, this was move 40, and we made the time control. I played queen f4, and my immediate idea was just to go queen e5 here to get queens off the board. And after that, I thought I should be reasonably close to a draw. So maybe he has something better here, but okay, it was move 40. And it's hard to suggest any improvements in the position, honestly. Because, okay, if he gets the knight to e4, then he probably improved his position by quite a big margin. But he cannot really do that yet, because if knight d6, I can just take on d5. And this rook cannot move because b6 is hanging, this rook cannot move, d5 is hanging, so it's a pretty strange position. Still, strategically speaking, it's good for black, but it's not so easy to improve. And I think no matter what he does, I still keep this idea of maybe going queen f4, queen e5, no matter what he does. Okay, here he played rook e8, and I decided to go for this simplification here. And I was feeling like this should end in a draw quite quickly. But rook c4 was already a good try from him. I'm sure that many players would just take on b6 and take on e3, when this gives me a very good version of the endgame which we had in the game, because here he has the d-pawn, and I can just easily hold here. For example, if rook d3, what was I thinking about? I can even go rook d8 here, and if f5 here, I'm probably not going to take. My idea was just to do this and then this. And in the game, his pawn was, he had the c-pawn and it was already quite far advanced. But here, I think I'm just drawing on the spot like this. If he gives the pawn, then okay. He's probably not in any danger to lose, but slowly he needs to start thinking of making a draw here and not over push. So this would have definitely been an easier draw for me. But he went for rook c4. I went rook b4. I don't think I should leave the h4 pawn, because if this pawn drops, then g5 drops as well. Now he took on e3. At first I thought about king f3, but then I realized that he has rook c3. And usually those endgames, if still all rooks are on the board, then it can be quite tricky, because my king is also quite weak. I didn't like this at all after rook c3. Maybe there's still something for me to be done here. Like I was thinking about rook b3. I don't know which one. Let's say this one, but there were just too many tricks here. Like there's maybe some check, there is some possibility to play d4, so I didn't like it. And I felt like this endgame should be a draw, which I guess is a correct assessment. I went for rook b8, locking in his king, c3, rook c8, and now f5. And here I spent almost all of my remaining time on a pretty difficult decision, at least it was for me. Should I take on f6, or should I go for this? Check and rook c6. It might be that both is a draw, and I was very close to playing rook c7, but then in the end it just felt like g takes f6 is the move that should be fine, should be okay here. It has to be a draw, because I'm exchanging even more material, and it has to be a draw. What I was thinking about, this is kind of the concrete way to try and make a draw. Now this pawn is hanging. I didn't even see a concrete way why I don't like this. But for example, let me give you one sample variation. This and now king d7. And I thought already here, my only move not to lose is rook a6. And I didn't think about it more than that. But I didn't like that I have to find one only move here. Maybe I even have other moves. Like, I don't know if I can try to defend like this. But it gets really sharp and a bit out of control. So it might be that this is just an easy draw, and black has no real tries here after the move rook a6. I mean, I was seeing this, for example, this, and if he has rook c3, I can just go for this move, and then I will try to see counterplay with my pawns. And I don't think that there is any chance for black to win in this position. But then, you know, I was kind of also starting to hallucinate if maybe the rook is on the d file, and then in this position after rook a1 he has the move rook d1, and I was running low on time, and in the end I just decided to take on f6. If this is an easy draw, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. I did not check the game yet, and also will not check it with an engine. I will only go through the games with an engine after the event is finished. But I would be quite curious about this moment, if this maybe would have been an easier draw, because I was actually quite struggling with this endgame. I knew that it has to be a draw, But it's quite unpleasant because it's a C pawn. If it would be a D pawn, it would be much easier to hold. But I always need to watch out if I run too far with my king. For example, here King E2 was also a move which I considered. Let's say he goes for, can he go for C2? I just want to make one point. For example, this one. Now my king is very far away and I'm running danger that he just cuts me. I think this position would already be losing for white. There are some nice tricks. For example, here I think rook c2 could be a draw, because in the pawn endgame I calculated something similar to this. I have the move h5. And if I'm not wrong, I'm in time here. Yeah, easily in time. So with this move h5, I'm often holding a draw. And here I should also be in time to draw easily, yeah. But just to make the point, with the c pawn, it's a bit more difficult. Now, I'm not even sure what I didn't like after king e2, but I went for rook c4, just protecting the pawn. Like, for example, if king e2, what could I think about? Maybe I was hallucinating something here, and rook f4. And especially if you're on low time, you don't really want to allow those things. I'm actually not sure if I'm even drawing here. Maybe this is some endgame knowledge which everyone should know. But especially after playing for more than 4 hours, it's quite difficult to recollect all of these positions. Like, when is it a draw now with the rook behind? It's definitely a draw if the pawn is still on the 6th rank. But I don't think I can draw this here. What was the position? I mean, it looks really scary, and it could also be lost already. Even though it's hard to believe. The problem is if rook f3, then black has the opposition. Yeah, really interesting, but I don't see the way to draw here. So I played rook c4. Another move which I thought about was rook c5, which looks a bit more logical, just cutting off the king, but I thought he can anyway go king e6. And at some point I'm probably gonna need to move my rook once again. So rook c4, king f5, king g2. Hitting the rook, I think that's quite logical. Rook d3, king f2, and now king e5. He went for this. If he goes for the move rook d2 check, then I can... What was I planning to play? I think king e3. There was one precise way here. I think king e3, rook here. And then it was important to give a check. If king g4, I have rook g5. And if king f6, then I have king d3. And now once again, if this move... Okay, probably... How am I drawing here? Because what I saw was that if he goes for the pawn endgame here, again I have this move h5. And I'm in the triangle. But if he takes the pawn just here, am I making a draw? This, and again rook f4. I don't love this. I don't love this. I was thinking about king e3 here. Well, I don't need to go for this. That's another story. I could probably just give another check. King g7. King here. Here. Now I should draw easily. King e2. And if rook f4, I could even play the move rook f3. That should be the easiest way to draw, as far as I can tell now. There was another idea which I thought about. It looks a bit strange, but just to go king e1. At least now I'm never running into any checks here. And actually, what was the... Yeah, king e1. I mean, this looks... What can black even try here? This. And then I can probably just give it... Well, I can also take. But then again, he can take. And then there's rook f4. Very tricky. Again, if king e2, rook f4, I'm not so sure if how this is. Yeah, could be quite tricky to hold all of that. So rook d2 is another try. I'm not sure. I think this was what I was intending to do. And now, okay, I think that there should be many ways to draw. Maybe this is also holding. h5, only move to do something is g5, h6. And could be a concrete way to draw as well. King g6, h7. If he takes, I can take on g5. And if he does something like this, yeah, now I should. If king h7, I have rook c6 at least. And if he gives a check first, I can even play this move. I cannot take. I can get a queen. So yeah, should be quite a few ways to draw. Also here, he played king e5. I played king e2. And after rook g3, I went for h5. It felt already quite tricky here because, I mean, he's getting rook g3 was a smart move, which I also underestimated. I only thought about rook h3, and then my idea was to go rook g4. And I think that is quite an easy draw, because if king f5, I always give a check, and then I can just go back. This was my desired defensive setup. But with rook g3, he's stopping this plan. And now I did not really see how I can defend. At least just slowly. I wanted to go for this quick route with h5, but it was kind of a gamble, yeah? I mean, it could be that this would also be losing. I think that it was always a draw, but it was a very close call here with h5. It is kind of logical because I want to liquidate. If he takes, then I can just give a check, and I can take here. And here the important thing is after king c4, if he gets the king to c2, I don't want to allow that. But here I have the move king d1, and after king b3, I can have a check. And as long as the king cannot get to c2, I'm easily making a draw here. That's why he tried to move king d5, which is by far definitely the best way to keep on playing. I went for rook h4. With 1 minute on the clock, not, as you can imagine, the easiest situation to be in. I'm running into a tempo with g5. Another option was to go for the move rook a4. But now the problem is if he takes, I cannot do this because now he has the move king b3 and my king is not on d1. So I was thinking about this, and I had the feeling that this should also be a draw with a move like this, for example. This is one of the moves which I thought about. Now his king is cut off. If he goes here, then I can take, and now it's a draw, for example, like this. If king d3, I have a check here. And apart from that, what else can he try? What I was a little bit worried about was some endgame like this. If I win the pawn here, and then that my king will be cut off. I don't think that black can be in time whatsoever. Like if rook d5, I have king c4 and the king cannot approach, otherwise h5 is hanging if the rook moves somewhere here. And I think here my king is just coming way too close. So I think this would also be a way to draw here. I just shouldn't give a check here. But otherwise I think well, he can try maybe one more thing. Can you give a check first? Where do I go? If king d3, then maybe king d3 just works. Yeah, because if c2 take, and then I can pick up the pawn next. Yeah, probably this is a draw as well. I went for the gambling move, rook h4, you could say, which really forces matters, because now he has to play g5, and it really gets move by move. I thought that I made a really good move here with rook h2, but after the game, David told me that he thinks that rook h1 should also be a draw. In the game, I was worried about the move king e4, h6, rook g2 check, king d1, and I think what I missed was that after king d3, I have rook h3. No, what I missed was here that I thought about rook a2, and now I did not really see a defense. And I think here is where David told me that this move is still a draw, rook h5. And if king d3, I can give a check. Yeah, and if king c4 already h7, maybe winning for white, but maybe black still has perpetual with rook a1 check. So perhaps this move can also make a draw. I think what David then told me was that he was thinking of just going back with rook. Was it here? Maybe. This and this, h7, rook h8. Which also looks actually quite tricky to me when I look at it now. I was thinking about some similar positions like this. But maybe, how is this endgame? Let's say he goes g4, I take g3, rook here. Maybe I'm just holding this. Because if g2, I can make this move, and now I can always give a check. And here, or give another check, I don't think it matters. Another check, and now go back to h6. I saw the same endgame with my rook on the 7th rank. There I thought it would be losing, because then the king has shelter on the h-file. But if my rook is here, it does look like it would be a draw. Okay, tough line, all of that. I decided to go for rook h2, keeping the 2nd rank protected. Of course, it looks strange because c2 would come with the tempo. But I still have king d2 everywhere. So I don't think c2 is a big threat. He went for king c4, h6, and now rook d3, which came as a surprise to me. And for a second, I thought that I would be losing now. What I thought about was the move c2, king d2, king b3. And now I saw that I have, what was it? I think I can go for h7 here. Because if rook c3, then I have rook h1 when everything is protected. And if he goes here, then I even have a check, and I think I'm winning. Because if he goes here, I promote with a check. Yeah, I think that's basically it now. That's what I calculated here. h7, I don't think there were any other relevant variations. Yeah, I can never go for something like this. Like usually the first one to promote just checkmates. Like here, for example, I mean, this is just over. I cannot do that. I need to stop black from queening. Okay, went rook d3. I think I made a good defensive move here with king e1 with 9 seconds on the clock. Because what I realized was, what did I actually realize? After h7, why didn't I go for, of course, rook d2, yeah. Rook d2 is the big threat, and I'm just losing the rook. So I found king e1 with 9 seconds on the clock, which I think is the only move to hold. I don't see anything. Maybe I can go for this, but this I'm not so sure of anymore, because c2, h7, maybe this is barely holding, yeah? Because, okay, I missed that in the end I have check here. Actually, black now should probably even take a knight, otherwise he might be losing. So maybe there are some, but maybe black can give a check first and then go here, because then black will promote with a check. So this might not work. I think that king e1 was a good move. Rook d8, h7, rook h8, and now after king d1, king b3, I was fairly lucky to have this move rook h6, which again I think could be the only move to draw, because now I'm getting ready to check from behind. g4, I gave a check. I think also important to do it like this. King c4, rook b7. I don't see what else I can do. My king has to stay fairly close here. And if king c1, I thought he would just go for g3. I think this was important. And now rook b7. I believe that I'm barely in time here with everything. King d3, and now another important move, I think rook g7. I thought that after rook d7 I could be in trouble. This is what I said earlier. Now let's say king e3. And what do I do now? I don't know. Let's say this one. I don't see anything better. g3. g2. And I thought that this endgame would be losing, because then he has the h2 square. before I think it was a draw because I always had the check here, but here I don't. So this looks losing to me. I didn't see a way to draw with this one. It looks just like his king will run over. Maybe I can run with my king as well. That could be an option. You know what I mean? Just to, maybe I can start something. Maybe I can start with king 1 here. Because if I get this pawn with the rook, then the king will protect the pawn. But okay, it's not really the way which I want to hold with. Yeah, it looks a little bit sketchy. So I think rook g7 was good, because after he moves the rook, then I give a check, and then I go back. And now I'm always threatening rook g8. So he either needs to go back with the rook, or what he did, he just went for a repetition of moves here, because yeah, I mean, he can go for this move, but now I can just take on g4, and now it's an easy draw. So that was the recap of round number 1. I think it was quite a long one, as expected, 40 minutes. If some of you are still around now, let me know if you enjoyed the recap. No engine analysis tends to be a bit longer, but hopefully more interesting for you guys to follow. I'm going to have some dinner now. It's 10 p.m. currently, and still need to upload it and shower and everything, so I'll get going. But I will see you tomorrow for the recap of round number 2 of my match against David Navara. Thank you guys for watching, and see you then.